the Torah, if the cards are didn't go the Torah, we'll go back to Torah. So a person who self-person, who doesn't accept the Torah, is not learning in this way, his life is Torah. It's chaotic. Chaotic in Gashman, chaotic in everything's chaotic. He's not able to become. His entire world is not only Tika.
I good public.
And Tika is not from vegan. When Tika started out in vegan, it says it started the 2,000 years of Tika started out in vegan. There's Kiyuz in Kabbalah. That's almost over 2,000 years. Tika started out in vegan, and that's when he started learning whatever that meant. He seen the light of it, which is up the way. What?
Yeah, 5 or 6 points. You can't ask better than that. We get third period.
I like to sleep. I was too tired.
Yeah, me too, but I saw the highlights in the morning. Yeah.
See you later. I want to give Yeshakar to the Parnas Hayom, and also to Mauricio and Vivian Gluck from the warm Miami Beach. The Ilu Nishmas, Avram Chaim, Ben Simcha, Nisham Shav and Aliyah, and the whole family Shav and Simcha, Nachas and Bracha. Byam darkecha, page Reish Nun Hey. We're learning about the darkecha during a time of katnus. Practical things to do and ways to think also during the time that a person is going through katnus. Katnus doesn't have to be any kind of a chalila tragedy or a terrible matzav. Just when that or is missing from a person's life, from a person's avoda. That's what we're learning about. It's on page Reish Nun Hey. Since every moment of our lives we have the responsibility to be Avdei Hashem. There's no time off from being an Eved Hashem. It means that during a time of katnus, there's a mahalach of avoda. It doesn't mean it's a time when I am not being Oved Hashem. That's the ikar. There's no time. There's no time when a person is not an Oved Hashem. What is the avoda during the time when he doesn't feel like being a Baal Avodah? That's what we're learning about. So, ois hey, page Reish Nun Hey. V'yachdir b'moicha v'libo, sha'af sha'achshav ena margish cheshek la'avod. The person should try to bring this strongly into his mind, into his heart, that even though right now he doesn't really have a cheshik. Doesn't have a cheshik to daven, to learn, whatever it is. Doesn't have a cheshik. And the feeling that he has is that there's no real tachlis to what he's doing. There's that emptiness. And the natural instinctive feeling is that during such a time, he can't really be Oved Hashem. The opposite is the truth is the opposite. Davka Akshav Zahasman Liknos Kinyan Otzim. Learned this a little bit. We spoke about this a little bit earlier. That Davka now is a time to be one can acquire a Kinyan Otzim, can acquire something that he wouldn't be able to normally acquire during a time of aura of light. B'amuna, first of all, with Amuna, again, it's the same thing in a relationship, a husband and wife, that during a time of katnas in a relationship when one doesn't have much of a cheshik to put into the relationship, but during that time, there's a faithfulness, there's an emonus, it could be kind of kinyan of Amuna, of being devoted and faithful, and so on. So too, during the time of katnas with the Kadosh Baruch Hu, person could be kind of kinyan otzum be'amuna uv'shaychus l'Hashem Yisborach. Be'amuna uv'shaychus l'Hashem Yisborach. V'lohavin she'Hashem Yisborach ba'atzma os es ha'astorah, and to believe, to know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu puts us through these different cycles. Of course, if there are things that a person is doing that he shouldn't be doing that contributes to the hastara, but Hashem puts us through different times. And Hashem is hiding in that hastara, in that concealment. Because everything is Hashem. Because if at a time when he's going through this nisayon and he doesn't feel anything, the person is masliach to understand that this is only a dimyan, that Hashem is not close to him during that time. It's just a dimyan, it's just imagination. And he understands that in that hastara, in that concealment, Hashem is there. That's the biggest haslacha that a person could have. Because the person acquires tremendous amuna and hakara and dveikus Hashem. She says tachlis hakol, because that's the tachlis of everything. So even though one thinks that one feels that the tachlis of my avodah is when things are going great, and I'm on, and I'm feeling very, very, very connected, which is wonderful. But the truth of the matter is that amuna that a person has during the difficulty or during the time when he doesn't have a cheshik, he continues on with doing what he has to do and not slipping into things that he shouldn't. And he's mechazik himself with amuna and so on. That's really tachlis hakol. Because that's the ikar inyan of dir b'tachton. That's the ikar inyan of being, of creation. In this world where one is there's a hastara of Hashem, where Hashem is concealed, the person nevertheless remains connected to and believes in Hashem. That's the ikar avodah. That's the tachlis hakol. We'll get back to the note in a minute. And in such a way, next page, he will bring or into his life. If he thinks about these things, instead of thinking in a negative way, thinking in this way, and the person will think that even though it's so hard for me, I feel so low and lacking in cheshivas and value and so on. Nearly she'ein ma la'avod b'zman hazeh, and it seems that I really can't be an oved. I can't do anything during this time. I will embassy bidiyuk lahefach, but to say to oneself that the truth is bidiyuk lahefach, the opposite. Visha achshav ani yochel hikondes l'madreges emuna udvekus. Right now, I could enter into this madrega of emuna and dvekus, simple emuna and dvekus. Atzuma ugvod, very powerful, strong emuna. V'lalos ma'od ma'od. I could have a tremendous aliyah through this. Imrak emod the Kabbalah's ol v'emunah. If I only pass this test, and I hold on with my Kabbalah's ol to continue doing the right things and to stay away from the wrong things, the emunah, I could acquire madregas, much higher madregas through this. And this way of thinking will give the person tremendous strength to contend with this difficulty, this time. Because he understands that just the opposite. Right now, it's a Pesach, it's an opening. Mamash a Pesach Atzum l'skarvel Hashem Yisbarach. B'pnimius emunah. In a way of pnimius emunah, which doesn't depend upon feeling good or not feeling good. It's ne'emonis, and it's the pnimius avodah of this time. Go back to Taf Mem Gimel. Let's just do the note. This is all Rabbi Nachman. Everything here is Rabbi Nachman. What he brings down here is also Rabbi Nachman. But as you know, throughout the Sefer, he stays away from quoting from different Svarim. He keeps it very, very posh. Without mentioning different names of tzaddikim and so on. But this is directly from Likutei Moharan. Uksiv b'yom tov v'hayeh b'tov, u'b'yom ra re'eh. It says in pasuk that b'yom tova hayeh b'tov, that when it's a good day, hayeh b'tov, go with it. Hayeh b'tov, feel good, it's good. B'yom tova hayeh b'tov, u'b'yom ra, and when it's a bad day, b'yom ra, so the pasuk says re'eh. It doesn't say to see what, it just says re'eh, look, re'eh. V'hainu. So Menachem says v'hainu. The famim over ha'adam yimei tov. Sometimes, and it doesn't have to necessarily be for any particular reason. It's just yimei tov. It's going well. The famim over ha'adam yimei tov. The ruchni is, or the gashmi is. The famim by yimei ra chas v'shalom. And there are times that they're just yimei ra, difficulties and so on. V'ini kishezoichel avodas Hashem b'toikev v'ois. When a person is zeicha that the avodas Hashem is very strong, u'mispal keroi b'chalibo, and he's davening well with all of his heart. V'gam parnasim suderes, and in gashmias his parnasa, things are going well in his life. V'shalom v'habriyas, and the shalom bayis and health. Kol b'chinas b'yom tovo. It's all part, and all together it's b'yom tova. It's a good time. It's a good day. Azai avodasahu hayeh b'tov. Then the avodah during that time is hayeh b'tov. Hayeh b'tov means sheyedovuk b'or hadas la'kir lahargish Hashem Yisbarach. Be thankful to Hashem, and use that time as a way of being dovuk to the or of Hashem, and appreciate all that you have, and so on and so forth. Avil b'yom ra. However, when it's a yom ra'ah, kishe'ena ra gilui elikus, and you do not see gilui, you don't feel HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence. The koshel of avodas Hashem, and it's very, very, very hard. The avodas Hashem is very hard. It could be also in gashmis that things are not going well. Azai avodasahi, then the avodah, Shlomo Melech is telling us, then the avodah is re'eh, to look, re'eh. Behind him. What does it mean re'eh? It doesn't say in the pasuk b'yom ra, on a difficult time. Believe or wait or be patient. It says re'eh, to look. V'hainu sheyistakel yoser amok. Re'eh means to look at things, to examine things, to see things in a deeper way. Re'eh, to be mizbaineh. Sheyistakel yoser amok b'yistakelus yoser amuka. V'yimtza gam sham his galus alakus. On a Yom Tov, and it's a Yom Tova, Hayeh B'Tov, everything is very clear, it's very obvious. But at Yom Ra, Shlomo Melech is saying, Re'eh. You have to look at things in a deeper way. Re'eh. And V'yimtza Gam Sham, you will find, if you look at things in a deeper way, you'll see also there, His Galus Alakus. you'll see also his galus of revelation of Elokus. You'll see Hashem there too. Ad sheyizke sheyiras Hashem Yisborach b'chol davar ba'olam. Till you'll be able to see HaKadosh Baruch Hu in everything in life, which is the tachlis of creation. To see HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that is Maloi Chala Aretz Kevoda. That's not a chachma when things are going well and a Byam Tova. It's just Hayei B'Tov. You're just riding that wave of Tov. But Byam Ra, when it's a day where things are not going well, Ruchni is Gashmi, so both, then the avoda is an avoda of Re'eh.
Excuse me, Rabbi. Very often it's the other way around. There's no atheists in a foxhole. Very often people do see God when it's very hard. When it's going well, they don't. So, and before there was a language of this is the tachlis. So I'm having.
You talk about the ikar is. Listen, of course there is such a thing where a person is definitely going through God forbid, a terrible crisis, like he's in a foxhole, and because of that, he feels that I have nowhere to turn, and it could be a time of tremendous ischazuk and that's great. Then that is actually, he is doing what he is engaged in, that work that's called re'eh. He is looking into his life. He's looking into what is it that I can connect to in this foxhole, and it's Hashem. That's great. Byam Tova. That's why Shalom Ach is saying you have to be very careful, because Byam Tova, like you're right, it's easy to forget and to just take it for granted. So Byam Tova, Hayei B'Tov. Hayei B'Tov means, it doesn't just mean to enjoy. Hayei B'Tov means to, like he said, to be Makir Hashem, to recognize that all of this is from Hashem, and to pay attention to Hashem as well. But generally speaking, the nature of a person is that when things we're not talking about in a foxhole, in a crisis necessarily, but when things are not going well, in terms of his avodas Hashem, serving Hashem, not just help. You understand? Help. I need help. But in terms of his regular learning, davening, mitzvahs, staying away from averos, there's more of a tendency during that time to slip away from strong avodas Hashem. No question. And very often when the guy gets out of the foxhole, even though he's still going through some stuff, he's not particularly attached to it. It's just when the shooting at him and he's sitting over there and he's asking, that's not a real avoda. That's just an emergency. But we're talking about during a time when there's a lull in one's life. It doesn't have to be a crisis. There's a lull in one's life. It's not in the hospital room or in the war. When there's a lull in one's life, the tendency of a person is not to get up to daven, not to work particularly hard in his learning, to feel that he's far from Hashem, and so on and so forth. It's the general tendency. V'Yehudi tzarich lahaskir v'ladaz shebizman she'Hashem yisborach manasa oso b'katnas hamochin. A person has to realize that at a time when Hashem is testing him, when he's going through this katnas, this smallness, as I davka ba'osa hazman ho'es lahamshich es hamochin hagdolim b'hatzumim b'yoser, is davka a time to be mamshich es hamochin, to draw into his life the mochin hagdolim, a greater awareness. Ba'atzumim b'yoser. Come on, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Zocha l'kol hasagaso davke b'heyosa b'ma'or b'tzara b'matzah. We see that by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. When did Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai? When was he zeicha for the greatest hasagas of all the secrets of the Zohar Kodesh and the highest connection to Kadosh Baruch Hu? Davke when he was in the cave and he was hiding. And he was going through that difficult time in his life, not when he was in the Beis HaMedrash, not when he was back home with the family and with the Talmidim, with the students. It's when he was in the cave during that time. As it says in the piyut of Rabbi Shimon, Sham Kanisa Hodcha V'Hadarecha. Sham Kanisa. The Maris Surim, in that Mara, in that cave when he was hiding, Sham Kanisa, there he acquired Hodcha V'Hadarecha. There, Rabbi Shimon, you acquired Hodcha V'Hadarecha. Your highest madregas were acquired davka in that place of the Mara, of the cave. V'im b'shar shel hakatnus, ha'adam yischazek belokav, and if during the time of katnus, a person is mischazek and doesn't just disappear and see it as a blank time, but instead attaches himself to Avodas Hashem in that katnus, v'yedesh hakol rak me'Hashem Baruch Hu, to know that this too, is this hastar, is from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'afilu b'hastar shebesoich hastar gam sham nimsa Hashem Baruch Hu. That's also Rabbi Nachman's words, which they made into a song. Gam sham nimsa Hashem Baruch Hu. Afilu b'hastar shebesoich hastar gam sham nimsa Hashem Baruch Hu. Shebesoich hastar gam sham nimsa Hashem Baruch Hu. V'meshar shel katnus adam yischazek b'lakav. V'yedesh hakol rak yuchal lahapil as kol hamachitzas v'hastaros b'rega echad. He'll be able to knock down all of the barriers, all of the concealment. As kol hamachitzas v'hastaros b'rega echad can be knocked down. Kamesh Omar Baal Shem Tov ala Kosov on the pasuk Omar Oyev Erdov Asig Achalek Shalal. By Kriyas Yamsuf, and we say this every day in the Shira and Oz Yashir, that the enemy said Omar Oyev, and we have all the olives here, which are a very big situs in this pasuk. But the olives, Omar Oyev Aleph Aleph Erdov Asig Achalek Shalal. We have nowhere else in Tanakh where we have a sequence of olives like that, where the enemy is saying, Erdov Hasiga Halek Shalal, that the enemy, that the Egyptians were saying that we're going to chase them and we're going to get them and we're going to divide the spoils, we're going to kill all the Jews and we're going to take everything from them. So Davka there we have Aleph, 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 Aleph. Davka there. Now Aleph is Hashem. Aleph is Alufu Shalom, is the master of the world, is Hashem. Sheyetzahara Unikra Oyev. Now the Yetzahara is called the enemy. Not only Egyptian, the Egyptians back then by Yamsuf. Anytime that you're contending with the Yetzirah, that's the paro. However, that paro is enclosed in your life at that time. So Yetzirah Nikra Oyev, that's your enemy. Urodef Achrei Nefesh Adam, and the enemy is hot in pursuit. That's the enemy. Because that's especially at a time of katnus, when the person is weak. So the enemy is in pursuit. Omar Oyev Erdov Hasik Achalek Hem Chamisha Pamim Ois Aleph. 5 times the letter Aleph. Hamremezes, which is hinting to Alufa Shalola, the master of the world. Behind him. Sheyehudi Tzarech Ladaz, that the Jew has to know. Shebizman, so the Baal Shem Tov taught on this. Shebizman Shahayetzer. That at the time when the Yetzer Hara, which is Shu Paro v'Chaloisa, which is Paro and his army, rode from Achra, when they're chasing after you. Gam Sham Nimsa Alufa Shalolam. The pasuk is saying over and over, Aleph, 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 Aleph. That Hashem is mislabish, Hashem is there, He's there, He's there, He's there. Just like in the word Chet, that the Baal Shem Tov said, which we spoke many times, that the word Chet, a sin, the Aleph is silent. The Aleph is there at the time when you're in your lowest point and you feel like doing something you shouldn't be doing, a chet. There's the Aleph. That's the Aleph is there. That's the Alufa Shel Olam. Gam Sham Nimsa Alufa Shel Olam. V'adarabah. And Adarabah, just the opposite. Davka Zman HaKatnus. Davka at this time of Katnus, who has Zman HaNachal HaHamshech HaKara Adsuma B'yichud Hashem Yisbarach. The Aleph and the Aleph could be heard over and over and over again. You could hear that Aleph. Davka, you could come to a place of the strongest Emunah, which is brought down in Chizah Shesvarim, that Emunah, the word Emunah, faith, is Aleph Mona. You count back to the Aleph. Mona means to count. Like if you're in a taxi in HSL and he tells you how much the trip is going to cost you, don't agree to that. Always say, Simit what? Et? HaMoneh. Put on the Moneh. What's the Moneh? The meter. Okay. You're taking a taxi for 5 blocks, and the guy says 120 shekel, and he's got some American, in the car. Say, comes out to be, 42 shekel. He never says, I was just kidding. They never say that. I tried, I tried. I tried. Why don't you tell me you were here before? I didn't know. It's your first visit. So Emunah is Aleph Moneh. And Aleph Moneh means that the meter is always running back to Aleph. Aleph Moneh is Emunah. So Paro is chasing you, and when you look back, you see Paro and the whole army coming after you. So the word Emunah is saying, look back and see the Aleph, and to count everything into your life and keep it on that meter of Emunah, of Aleph Moed, to count everything by Emunah. Davka during that time, you can connect with Hakara Tzum V'Yichud Hashem Yisborach Ladaz Shakol Zehu, and to know that everything is from Him, Ve'ein Od Milvado, in a way that's more clear than usual, than regular times. Next page, in Tov Mem Dalet on the bottom. Ube'emes Achrei Sheyaschil Ba'avoda, and the truth is that after you try working at this, V'yis Armeitz Bekatnus, and one shouldn't wait until Chas V'Shalom is some terrible time, Yom Ra that's horrible. Just when there's again a lull in one's avodas Hashem. Ube'emes Achrei Sheyaschil Ba'avoda, V'yis Armeitz Bekatnus, and you try. As a Yochel Iskos Shelo Rak She'ilo Cheshek La'avod, you'll find that not only do you then have a cheshek to be the Oved Hashem, Mikoach Havan Shezeh Kedai, Ella Etzem Hakrova HaMiyuchedes Hakirva HaMiyuchedes Azu Hashem Yisborach Torah Lo Ma'od. Not just that you will be able to resume your avodas Hashem, you'll have a fantastic charge in your avodas Hashem. You'll have an excitement of your avodas Hashem if you work on this avodah that we're learning about during a time of katnus. Sikum, back on top, a summary of where we're holding until now. Bismani HaKatnus. During times of katnus, Adam Tzarech Lavad Mitoch Akshanos, to be stubborn and Mesirus Nefesh. Akshanos and Mesirus Nefesh. Lahachzik b'maisav hatovim, to continue with the good things that you have in your life, with your seder and learning. Again, doesn't have to be learned. It doesn't have to be the same level, even the same material, the same curriculum, but to stay on course. Lahachzik b'maisav hatovim. Lefachos b'chitzonius, at least to keep the framework of your life, davening and learning, and to stay at least bechitzonius. Upnimius avodahi, but the pnimius of the avoda. So the chitzonius is just staying in. The pnimius of the avoda is lahavin Hashem Yisborach idcha av she'eincha margish, so to understand, to believe that Hashem is here with you, even though you don't feel it. And this feeling that you have that He's not there, Zerak Nisayin, is only a Nisayin, a test. Liros and Taslich L'schazik Be'emunah. See if you're going to be Mischazik Be'emunah. Tovin she'ein matzah ba'olam she'Hashem Yisborach lo nimtza itcha. And the test is whether you are actually a real mammon to be able to see that aleph in your life, even when there are many, many things that are blocking the aleph. Be able to go back to that aleph of the Aluf Shalom, despite all of the things that you're going through. You see in the davening, like the whole davening of Yom Niraim, that the piyutim, all the tefillas that we're saying, are going in two orders, right? They're going from Aleph to Saf, the order of Aleph base, and they're also going in the order of what? Tashrak, right? They're going from Taf back in the direction of Aleph. Those are the two avodas. One is Byam Tov Ve'Heba Tov. When things are going well, Byam Tov, that's in the Seder of Aleph base. When things are Keseder, that's in the order of Aleph base. And the order of Tashrak, of Tov Shin Reish, is when a person is not in that matzav of Tov, but it's a Byam Ra, and the person is turning and trying to bring himself back to a place of Aleph, to go from Tov to Shin to Reish to Kuf, and to get back to that place of Aleph. So and if you look in each of those piyutim, you look carefully, you'll see that there's a derech of avoda of Aleph Beis and there's a derech of avoda of Tashrak. Just like we see, like this, it's brought down in this farm that the springtime is Chodesh Aviv, Pesach is Aviv. Aviv is in the state of Aleph Beis, Aviv. And that's when that's Byam Tova, Yeba Tov. That's Aleph Beis when the spring is, everything is lichtig, is sunny and beautiful, and everybody's in a great mood when it's the spring. And Tishrei is the seder of Tashrak, is the other one. When the person is feeling that it's now the summer is ending, and he's feeling about himself not particularly great because of the things that were not so good this past year. So the avoda is then more of an avoda of Tashrak, of Tavshin Reish, to go back and to come to Aleph, to come to Hashem, and to work very, very hard to strengthen one's emunah. So this is always there's these two ways of counting: Aleph Beis and the seder of Aleph Beis and the seder of Tashrak, of working towards the Aleph and working with the Aleph and working towards the Aleph. When a person is in a place of Aleph Beis, then the avodah is to take that emunah and to bring that aura of his emunah into everything in his life, all the way down to the tiniest little details of Beis Gimel Dalet Hey Vav Zayin Ches, all the way down to everything in his life, with his eating, his marriage, his taking care of his kids, his parnasa, to take the aura of Hashem and to go with it, Aleph Beis Gimel Dalet, into everything in his life, to fill everything in his life with that Aleph of emunah. During a time of Tashrak, he's not holding by that, filling everything in his life with. He's trying to get back to Hashem. Then the avodah of Tashrak is to go from Tit to Tav, and to work his way to the Aleph, to go up to the Aleph, and to be mischazik in this avodah during a time of Katnas. That's the pnimius. And if the person is zeicher to understand this, to think about this, and to understand this, it'll make it much easier for you to continue on with your stubborn faithfulness to all the mitzvahs, not to slip into chalil, into things that are not good, and so on. All this whole maamar that we're learning of Katna should be the talk that every single mashgiach gives on the opening day of the Zman. You know, that first day of the Zman when everybody's coming with their new svarim, all the boys have their new svarim. Okay, guys, we're learning Ksubas this year, and everybody's got all the svarim, and they're all excited. It's the first day of the Zman. So there's a feeling of godless, of excitement, and so on. It would be very, very good if there would be. Of course, it's Yom Tov, and the avodah then is Hayei B'Tov. It's great, but invariably, as the Zman goes on, it becomes more and more difficult to feel that, and it would be important to make hachanis, that the boys would have an understanding that there is a way to serve Hashem during a time of katnas. It doesn't mean that you read the nefila, all of those negative things, and sleeping in the room and staying in the dormitory and not coming out or disappearing. But there's a way of serving a Kadosh Baruch Hu during the time of katnas, and that's for everything in life. That should be a conversation also, in the chassan class, in the kala class, of how to prepare for Yemei HaKatnas. Because then the chassan kala think, no, we're never going to have any katnas. Our marriage is always going to be like that, Aleph plus. Our marriage is going to be always Aleph plus. And they look at each other with this little smile about how we're exempt from all the other stuff that we've heard about marriage. All those jokes are not about us and so on. And then the joke is on them, of course, because everybody goes through Yemei Ra. Everybody. If someone tells you that they haven't and they don't, they're not telling you the truth. Everybody goes through Yemei Ra. Each one, they're madrega in different ways, but they go through Yemei Ra. And it's important, just like Yosef HaTzadik made hachanis. Yosef HaTzadik made hachanis during the good days, rather. He made hachanis so we should be able to deal with things properly during the hard days. to make hachanas during the good days for the times of famine. That's a way that a person is Oved Hashem. And that when the famine comes, because invariably there's going to be times of famine, that when that famine comes, the person has within him a storehouse of emunah, that he's able to be mischazik, and he has a mahalach. He doesn't just get lost and drop everything. He has a mahalach. He has a way of thinking, a way of avodah during a time of famine. It's not just nothing. The whole inyan of Golus from this now beginning Shmais Shabbos we're learning Shmais. The whole inyan of Golus is Leishamu al Moshe Mikotze Ruach Avodah Kasha. They couldn't hear Moshe Rabbeinu at all Mikotze Ruach Avodah Kasha. And as Rabbi Nachman explains, that when a person is going through a time of Kotze Ruach, which is a time of katnas, everything in his life becomes Avodah Kasha. Getting up in the morning is the hardest thing in the world. When a person is in a place of Kotze Ruach, when the Ruchnis is weak, when he's in a time of katnas, so Lo Shamu al Moshe, they can't hear Moshe Rabbeinu was coming and telling them good news. Moshe Rabbeinu is saying, hey, things are looking up, it's going to be good, we're going to be leaving, Lo Shamu al Moshe, they couldn't listen to him. They couldn't hear Mikotze Ruach, because they were in a place of katnas, terrible katnas. An Eved is in a place of terrible katnas. All he's thinking about is just how to live. He's not thinking about madregas. He's not thinking about Yushalayim and what it means to Avodas Hashem. He's just trying to avoid getting smacked by the Egyptian. That's all. When you're an Eved, you're not thinking. It's hard for you to even think of other people, of anybody else. You're just trying to manage, not to get beaten, and to get yourself a piece of food or something, or maybe an extra drink of water when a person is in that matzah. And Kotze Ruach, it's a gefährlich Kotze Ruach, a terrible Kotze Ruach. And when a person is in that place of Kotze Ruach, then Avodah Kasha. Then Avodah is Kasha. The work is hard. Davening is hard. To sit and to concentrate on your learning is hard. Everything feels like it's hard at the time of Kotze Ruach. And that's why one has to try. One is able to gather a little bit of what's left of one's strength during that time. And we see this by when you read any of the stories of what Jews went through, terrible sorrows, and how they mechazik themselves when they were in those situations. All this chaskus is this way of avodah. It wasn't. They didn't learn Byam darkecha, but the person on his own turned to that and understood that if I give into this Kotze Ruach, I'm going to die. I'm not going to survive. Not going to survive. I've told you many times. One of the things that my father told me so many times when we were growing up, and that when they were there towards the end in concentration camp, when things were like winding down, so they weren't even working at the end. The last 2 months or so, I don't remember exactly how long it was. Until then they had them working all the time. My father said there was a thing that they had them doing. There were these iron rails. There was a railroad, and they would have them carry these. They were, the people weighed 50 pounds, 40. They were carrying these iron rails. The Germans said to take it here and to carry it over there, all the way somewhere there, and then to carry it back. That's all. And if you dropped it, the guy was sitting there with a gun. And if you dropped it, he shot you. That was how things were until the last month or two. They weren't working anymore. They stopped. The Germans stopped their projects. They were trying to figure out what they were doing. I don't know what. And my father said, so what was happening was that he said in a certain way when we were working. So you were busy, and you were trying to concentrate on getting this thing over there, so not to get shot. He said the last month or two they weren't really standing around shooting at people. Where he was there in Mauthausen, they weren't shooting at people. So the last month or two, we were just like sitting around and starving to death. Basically, we were just starving to death. We were just sitting there. They didn't do it. So he said that my father said that when you saw a person who just sat without moving and was just staring out into space and stopped talking to people, stopped talking to the guys. So my father said the last day of his life, maybe one more day. And the other guys would go over and try to talk to him or to move him and to get him, take a walk with him, to go back and forth. Because my father said, you saw that at that time that the person was just done. He gave up. And my father said that he always had Hakar Satov, because one of the things that he kept busy with during that time was he had Hakar Satov, lice. He said, lice, bugs. He said, because the lice that they had, my father said, were like golf balls. That's how big they were, because they were very healthy, the lice. And my father said they were all over your body, from head to toe. You were covered with all over. There was lice. My father said it was Gavaldi, because he used to be busy during that time. They would sit there and they were busy with. My father said when you saw a guy that just sat there and they were eating him up, the lice, it was done. So he said that it was the best thing for him, the bugs. It was a project, and to work on getting rid of them. When you sat there and it didn't mean anything anymore, life, and it didn't matter to stay clean, to stay free of the bugs. So that was it. You were done. And you could almost see that happening to a person in life. They just stop caring in their marriage, their kids, and Chalila. They stop, and they get stuck in that place, and that is the most dangerous thing of all. Means that it's just a day or two, not till you die, because that's not talking about God forbid a person dying, but till you start looking at things you shouldn't be looking at, and doing things you shouldn't be doing, and so on and so forth, which is a way of dying. It's a way of dying. There's a descent in one's life is death. Going down, losing yourself into things that are not right, that's called death. That's called dying. And Donald said, "La omus ki echya, ki echya." Lo omus, that's one aleph, is omus, I will not die, is aleph. Ki echya, so I make the choice between the aleph of dying or the aleph of ki echya, aleph ches yud hey. That's the choice that a person is making, and it doesn't have to be anything, as I said, I'm not talking about something so scary or so terrible like the concentration camp, but in one's avodas Hashem, to be busy. He says, Yakel olav lahachzik b'akshonis b'avadosa, to be stubborn, akshonis. Gam yikna kinyan amok b'emunah, and you'll find that you'll be able to be kind of a higher madrega in emunah that you were ever able to acquire. Tavka, when you work your way through that katnas. That's why when you read stories like this of the way my father was describing Jews that went through these difficulties, or not such horrible things, but went through times that Tavka, there were two ways that you either lost everything, or you were kind of emunah. My wife shared with me the other day, she was reading an article somewhere about some famous Jewish musicians. An American, he was born in Russia, but he was here in America. I don't know, it was Gershwin, one of these famous musicians. I don't know. It wasn't Gershwin, some other famous musician. Because Gershwin was here early, he was here earlier. But it was a famous musician.
Composer, like
there was a composer. There were two Jewish brothers that were writing many of the famous musicals. No, not them.
Irving Berlin?
No, Irving Berlin was here earlier. Yeah. I don't remember. Sherman, I think. I don't remember, but they wrote a lot of the music for musicals. Mary Poppins, and a lot of these musicals they wrote after the war, because they were in the war. These two guys, these brothers, and and they were interviewing them one of them died like in the 70s. I don't know. They were interviewing them, and they were in the American Army, and they were at the liberation of Dachau. These guys, these composers, they were by the liberation of Dachau, and they were talking to him or to his son. They were talking to him about religion. So they came from, I think, a religious home, but he said that when he was there at the liberation of Dachau, he said that he stopped believing in God because he couldn't believe in a God that would do such a thing. So we were talking about that, and I've mentioned this in the past, that he liberated Dachau and he stopped believing in God. But there were Jews that were in Dachau that from that time that they were mischazik b'emunah. I know it sounds to us like, how's that possible? But that's what you see. That other Rabbi, during that time, they were mischazik b'emunah. And my father told me that the strongest moment he had in his life when he was going through that. He said those were the strongest days of his connection to Hashem Yisbarach, when he went through what he went through.
Why?
Because of all that we learned. Because it brought him to a place where he had to decide: is he in this hastara? Is he here in this concealment, or is he not here? There are some people that decided or came to the conclusion that he's not here, and there were others that came to the conclusion that he is here, and they were clinging to him more than ever before because of what you were saying before in the Faksal. So they were clinging to him in a very, very strong way. And my father told me that he saw Hashem in everything that was going on. He saw Hashem. So, I mentioned Nosson Sharansky, and when did Sharansky become a big mammon? Not when he was back, growing up in his house. He was raised in a house without emunah. When he was in the Gulag in Soviet jail, that's when he held on to his Tillim, and that's when he was mischazik in his emunah. It's the decision that a person makes to, like we learned at the beginning of this parak, that Byam Ra'ah Re'eh. When you're going through a hard time, Re'eh. Think deeply, look more deeply to find HaKadosh Baruch Hu in this matzav that you're in. And when you find Hashem in that difficult matzav, again, these are very extreme things, but whatever that is, when you're re'eh, when you look for Hashem, you find Hashem in that difficult matzav, you're able to be kinda a madrega of amunah that's stronger than anything that you felt even during a time when you were having an aliyah. Because the tachlis of creation is to find Hashem in this world, and the highest and deepest way of finding Hashem in this world is in the basement of this world. When you find him in the basement, in the lowest and darkest places, there too is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So then, that's the whole tachlis of being in this world, of coming down into this body, into the physical body, and to the physical world, and uncovering HaKadosh Baruch Hu, davka during that place, in that time. V'tzarech lahayr ezmani hakatnas. Therefore, a person has to bring light into these times of katnas. Aleph ladas shebekor zeh tala harkech harbe. To know that during this time, davka during this time, if you continue on serving Hashem during this time of katnas through this koach, you're going to have an aliyah, a much bigger aliyah afterwards. Beis. At the koine kinyan amok v'amiti b'keshem Hashem Yisbarach u'be'amunah by ayidei zeh she'ata mischazik lahamshich b'avodaso, by being mischazik and continuing on, just even in the chitzanias, doing what you're supposed to do, and not letting go and slipping into the wrong things, but to be mischazik, or to stop doing the good things, but rather at the mischazik lahamshich b'avodaso u'v'ne'emanis ito, and you remain faithful to Hashem, doing what you're supposed to do, and not to go into chas v'shalom bad things, and you stay with your going to daven, and with your learning, and with your regular program. Af she'ein chamargish osa. Even though you don't feel at all, you don't feel any connection at all, nevertheless, you continue on with that, then you're going to be able to have, dafka through that, you're going to be able to acquire the ikra amuna that you have in your life, you're going to acquire during those difficult times. That's what it means. Byam ra re'eh. Look at things in a deeper way during the time that it's Yom Ra, as opposed to the natural instinct of a person, that when it's a Yom Ra, he doesn't feel like looking at anything, he doesn't think about anything, he just goes into that place of emptiness. This is a mahalach of re'eh, of looking at things, of thinking about things. A person to always be in a place of re'eh. Yom Tova, Hayeh B'Tov, and Yom Ra.